A bear finds a baby among the wreckage of a car in the forest. He rescues it and takes it to his shelter in the woods. What he does next defies all logic. The Blue Ridge Mountains rose majestically under the starlit sky of Asheville, their slopes covered with dense vegetation that whispered ancient secrets. The cold night air carried the scent of pine trees and the distant sound of streams winding between rocks. It was one of those nights when fog descended like a veil over the city, transforming the mansion lights into small, diffuse points in the darkness. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. In the luxurious Highland Heights neighborhood, the Anderson mansion stood out with its imposing architecture. Michael, a respected businessman in the hotel industry, was finishing a video conference in his office. His face revealed the weight of concerns that had consumed him in recent weeks. Outside, Sarah, his wife, cradled little William in the winter garden, watching the first stars appear in the sky. "It's time to go," announced Michael, appearing at the door with a document folder and 2 travel bags. "We need to reach the mountain house before the fog gets thicker." Sarah adjusted William in the special car seat they had bought the previous week. The baby, with his big, curious eyes, played with a small teddy bear, his inseparable companion. "Are you sure we need to go today? The fog is getting worse," she questioned, but Michael was already storing the bags in the car trunk. "I have an important meeting tomorrow morning with international investors." "The mountain house is closer to the meeting location," he responded, his voice betraying anxiety he tried to hide. Meanwhile, in the depths of the forest surrounding the city, something extraordinary was happening. Kodiak, an impressively large grizzly bear, moved silently between the trees. His presence in the region was a mystery that had intrigued residents and authorities since his escape from the private zoo owned by the Thompsons, one of the most influential families in the region. The zoo, an ambitious project that aimed to be a reference in conservation, had become a source of controversy after allegations of irregularities. Kodiak's escape, its most emblematic animal, had made headlines across the country. But there was something different about this bear, something his former keeper knew well. In the cabin near the entrance of the forest reserve, Ethan Miller organized his tracking equipment. As a guide in the region for more than 2 decades, he knew every trail, every stream, and every story the mountains held. In recent months, he had dedicated himself to studying Kodiak's movement patterns, intrigued by residents' reports about the animal's unusual behavior. "You won't believe what I found today," said Olivia, his assistant, entering the cabin with a leather-bound notebook. This was among the abandoned belongings at the zoo. Ethan examined the notebook with growing interest. It was the diary of Kodiak's former keeper, filled with detailed notes about the bear's behavior. The pages revealed something extraordinary. Since he was a cub, Kodiak had demonstrated a unique sensitivity, a capacity for connection with other beings that defied comprehension. On the winding road that cut through the mountains, the Andersons' car advanced slowly through the increasingly thick fog. Michael kept his eyes fixed on the road, while Sarah tried to calm William, who was starting to get restless. The small teddy bear had fallen between the seats, causing a soft cry. The night seemed to envelop the vehicle in an increasingly tight embrace, while the mountains silently guarded the events that were about to forever transform the life of that family and the history of Asheville. In the heart of the forest, Kodiak raised his head, his alert senses capturing something that only he could perceive. The fog was becoming increasingly dense on the Blue Ridge Mountain Road, turning the Andersons' journey into a growing challenge. Michael leaned over the steering wheel, trying to see through the white curtain that seemed to swallow the car's headlights. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the road, her heart tight with an inexplicable foreboding. "Michael, maybe we should stop somewhere until the fog lessens," she suggested, turning to check on William, who was now playing with his own feet, oblivious to the tension in the air. "We're almost there, Sarah. There are no safe places to stop on this stretch," Michael replied, his voice betraying the fatigue accumulated from recent weeks. Problems at the company consumed his thoughts, especially after discovering irregularities that could compromise all his years of work. In the adjacent forest, Kodiak moved with surprising agility for his size. Years of captivity had not diminished his natural instincts. The bear seemed guided by something beyond mere animal intuition, as if a greater force was leading him through the dense forest. In the diary found by Olivia, the keeper described extraordinary events involving Kodiak. "Today, I witnessed something inexplicable," one of the entries said. "Kodiak demonstrated uncommon empathy with an injured Coati cub we found near the enclosure. He not only remained calm, but seemed genuinely concerned about the small animal." Ethan reread these passages in his cabin, trying to better understand the nature of the animal that so intrigued the region. Stories from local residents about Kodiak sightings always mentioned his peculiar behavior. Unlike other bears, he seemed more interested in observing than in seeking food. On the road, a sudden movement caught Michael's attention. A white-tailed deer appeared out of nowhere, its eyes reflecting the headlights like two shining coins. The businessman sharply turned the wheel, trying to avoid the animal. The car skidded on the wet road, spinning out of control. "Michael!" Sarah's scream mixed with the sound of tires sliding on the asphalt. William, startled by the jolt, began to cry. The vehicle slid off the road, breaking through the side barrier and plunging into the darkness of the forest. The impact was violent. The car rolled over several times before stopping amidst the ancient trees. The silence that followed was broken only by William's frightened cries and the distant sound of nocturnal nature. Kodiak, who was in the vicinity, raised his head upon hearing the crash. His instincts drove him towards the accident. Approaching cautiously, the bear noticed the destroyed vehicle and the sound of infant crying. In Ethan's cabin, the radio crackled with an urgent message. "Attention rescue units. We have reports of a possible accident on the Blue Ridge Parkway near mile marker 47. Anderson family hasn't reached their destination. Immediate support needed." Ethan jumped up, grabbing his rescue equipment. "Olivia, alert the team. We need to mobilize immediately." As he prepared to leave, his eyes fell again on the keeper's diary. One passage in particular caught his attention. Kodiak has a special connection with children. Today, during a school visit, he remained close to the fence, attentively observing the children for hours, as if he wanted to protect them. In the darkness of the forest, Kodiak was getting closer and closer to the crashed car. William's cry seemed to awaken something deep in the animal, an old memory of his time at the zoo, when he used to observe visiting families with curiosity and gentleness. Fate had intertwined the paths of the bear and the baby in a way that no one could have predicted. As rescue teams mobilized, an extraordinary story began to unfold in the depths of the Blue Ridge Mountains. A story that would challenge everything people believed they knew about nature and the connection between humans and animals. The full moon tried to break through the fog blanket covering the Blue Ridge Mountains, creating ghostly shadows between the ancient trees. William's cry echoed through the forest like an ancestral call, while Kodiak cautiously approached the wreckage of the vehicle. The grizzly bear moved with surprising delicacy, his enormous paws carefully avoiding the twisted metal pieces. His eyes, endowed with singular intelligence, immediately focused on the car seat where William was still strapped, protected by the safety system his parents had so carefully installed. In the front seat, Michael and Sarah remained unconscious. The airbag had deployed, protecting them from the most severe impact. The fog was beginning to enter through the broken windshield, enveloping the interior of the vehicle in an ethereal mist. Kodiak leaned over the broken window, his muzzle close to William. The baby, instead of showing fear, instantly stopped crying, his big eyes fixed on the bear with a curiosity unique to childlike innocence. A small smile appeared on his face, and his little hands extended towards the animal's snout. In the rescue cabin, Ethan frantically organized his team. "We need to split into groups," he instructed, unrolling a detailed map of the region on the rustic table. "The fog is making the search difficult, but we know these trails. The car must be somewhere between Pineview Point and Big Rock Curve." Olivia, who continued studying the keeper's diary, suddenly looked up. "Ethan, listen to this. Kodiak demonstrates extraordinary protective behavior. Today, when a monkey cub fell near his enclosure, he signaled insistently until the team noticed the injured animal. His capacity for empathy defies understanding." In the forest, Kodiak faced a delicate challenge. With impressive gentleness, he began to examine the car seat that held William. His claws, normally instruments of strength and defense, moved with surgical precision, looking for a way to release the baby without hurting him. The moon finally managed to break through the fog, illuminating the scene with its silver light. Kodiak's dark fur shone with dewdrops as he continued his meticulous task. William, still smiling, babbled happy sounds, as if conversing with his unlikely savior. With a precise movement, Kodiak managed to release the car seat mechanism, carefully holding the structure by the handle. As he had observed parents do so many times at the zoo, he lifted William from the car wreckage. The baby let out a crystalline laugh, his small hands grasping the bear's fur. In the city, the first news of the Anderson family's disappearance began to spread. Asheville's Police Operations Center transformed into an improvised command point. Journalists were already gathering at the entrance, thirsty for information about the whereabouts of the businessman and his family. Ethan and his team advanced through the forest, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like blades of light. The experienced guide noticed something unusual on the ground, huge footprints mixed with marks of skidding tires. His heart raced as he recognized the pattern. They were unmistakably Kodiak's marks. In the depths of the forest, the bear carried his precious burden with extraordinary care. Each step was calculated, each movement gentle. William, lulled by the gentle swaying, began to yawn, his little eyes heavy with sleep. The bear seemed to know exactly where to go, guided by an instinct that transcended human understanding. The surrounding forest seemed to respect this unique moment. Nocturnal birds silenced their song. Small animals observed the passage of the unlikely pair with respectful curiosity. It was as if nature itself recognized the importance of this extraordinary encounter, where the barriers between the wild world and the human world dissolved in an act of pure compassion. The news of the Anderson family's disappearance spread through Asheville like wildfire. The Police Operations Center transformed into a human anthill, with rescue teams, authorities, and journalists converging on the location. The lights of patrol cars and ambulances tinted the fog red and blue, creating a surreal spectacle in the mountain night. Ethan Miller led his team along the steep trail, his knowledge of the region proving invaluable. The marks he had found, Kodiak's footprints mixed with signs of the accident, told a story he was still trying to decipher. Olivia, a few steps behind, carried the keeper's diary as if it were a map to a hidden treasure. "Look at this," called one of the rescuers, illuminating the wreckage of the Andersons' car with his flashlight. The vehicle was partially covered by vegetation, the marks of the fall still visible on the slope. Michael and Sarah were found unconscious in the front seats, but alive. William's car seat, however, was empty. "The tracks continue this way," observed Ethan, examining the damp soil. Kodiak was here and he wasn't alone. His years of experience as a guide allowed him to read the forest like an open book. Each broken branch, each crushed leaf, told part of a story unfolding in the depths of the mountains. At Asheville's hospital, Michael and Sarah received the first medical attention. When Sarah regained consciousness, her first thought was for William. The news that the baby was not in the car caused a commotion among doctors and nurses. The medical team struggled to keep her calm, while Michael, still dazed, tried to process the situation. Back in the forest, the search intensified. Helicopters flew over the area with powerful searchlights, their lights dancing between the treetops like giant fireflies. The sound of the rotors mixed with the calls of the rescue teams, breaking the ancient silence of the mountains. In the base cabin, Olivia continued studying the keeper's diary. A new entry caught her attention. "Kodiak has a peculiar preference for elevated and protected places. I discovered today his favorite hiding spot in the zoo, a small artificial cave at the highest point of the enclosure, from where he could observe all the movement without being disturbed." This information made Ethan rethink his search strategy. "The mountains have several rock formations with small caves," he explained to his team. "If Kodiak maintains his instincts from captivity, it's possible he sought a similar place." National media began to arrive in the city. Television station vans parked on the narrow streets of the historic center, transforming the quiet Asheville into a center of national attention. Speculations about William's fate multiplied, some bordering on sensationalism. At the police station, Sheriff Robert Hayes organized the available information. The story of the fugitive bear, which previously seemed an isolated case, now intertwined with the disappearance of baby William in a way no one could have predicted. The last weeks of Kodiak's sightings were plotted on a map, creating a pattern that could help in the search. Meanwhile, in the depths of the forest, unusual sounds began to be heard. They were not the typical noises of nocturnal fauna, nor the echoes of rescue teams. It was something different, something that made Ethan stop in his tracks, sharpening his ears. A unique mixture of sounds, the crystalline laughter of a baby and a soft, almost melodious grunt of a bear. The moon continued its journey across the sky, now partially covered by clouds that promised rain. The temperature gradually dropped, worrying the rescue teams. But Ethan remained optimistic. His knowledge about Kodiak, although limited, told him that the bear did not represent a threat. In fact, he was beginning to suspect that the animal could be William's best chance. In the depths of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Kodiak had found a special place, a natural clearing surrounded by ancient trees where moonlight created silver patterns on the moss-covered ground. It was a location few humans knew about, protected by rock formations that made it almost invisible to those who didn't know exactly where to look. It was to this natural sanctuary that the bear brought William. With gentleness, Kodiak deposited the car seat on a soft carpet of leaves and moss. The baby, who had fallen asleep during the journey, awakened softly, his eyes sparkling with curiosity as he observed the new environment. A gentle sound echoed through the clearing, Kodiak's soft roar. As if responding to an ancestral call, small animals began to emerge from the shadows. Raccoons descended cautiously from the trees, their striped tails swinging like curious pendulums. Nocturnal birds perched on nearby branches, their bright eyes fixed on the unusual scene unfolding. William, far from showing fear, clapped his hands and smiled at each new animal that approached. His crystalline laughter echoed through the clearing, creating a unique symphony with the sounds of the forest. Kodiak remained close, his enormous body serving as a protective barrier between the baby and any potential danger. The place seemed enveloped by a magical aura. Fireflies began to dance between the trees, creating ephemeral constellations that reflected in William's wonder-struck eyes. The temperature, which would normally be too low for a baby, remained surprisingly pleasant in the clearing, as if nature itself conspired to protect its small visitor. A small raccoon, braver than its companions, approached William. With delicate movements, it began to sniff the car seat, provoking giggles from the baby. Kodiak watched attentively, his behavior resembling more an attentive guardian than a wild predator. In the treetops, barred owls landed silently, their feathers blending with the shadows. Their amber eyes followed every movement in the clearing, like ancient sentinels witnessing a unique event. A pair of squirrels, attracted by curiosity, hung from the lower branches, their faces expressing a mixture of caution and fascination. Kodiak moved around the clearing with surprising grace for his size. Occasionally, he approached William to check on him, his muzzle gently touching the baby's face, who responded with laughter and attempts to grab the bear's fur. It was an interaction that defied all natural laws, a pure demonstration that the instinct for protection transcends barriers between species. Small dewdrops began to form on the leaves, creating a spectacle of light when touched by moonbeams. William extended his little hands, trying to reach the shimmering droplets. His enthusiasm was contagious to the surrounding animals, which seemed to progressively relax in the presence of the small human. A mockingbird, breaking the protocol of its normally diurnal behavior, began to sing softly. Its melodious song echoed through the clearing, like an improvised lullaby for the special visitor. Other birds joined the chorus, creating a unique harmony that seemed to cradle William. At the edge of the clearing, a small spring bubbled between the rocks, its crystalline sound mixing with the natural symphony. Kodiak, demonstrating a surprising understanding of human needs, occasionally wet his paws in the cool water and gently shook them, creating a refreshing mist that kept the environment pleasant for William. The night advanced, but in the enchanted clearing, time seemed to flow differently. It was as if that small piece of the forest existed in its own dimension, where the rules of the natural world mixed with something deeper and more mysterious. There, under Kodiak's protection and the curious company of the forest animals, William was safer than anyone could imagine. In the improvised operations center at the Asheville police station, Sheriff Robert Hayes spread maps on the table while receiving the latest updates via radio. The entire city was mobilized in the search for William, and news of Kodiak's involvement generated conflicting reactions among residents. Ethan Miller, after hours of intense searching, gathered his team near a peculiar rock formation. Olivia continued studying the keeper's diary, its yellowed pages revealing new secrets about Kodiak. "Ethan, listen to this," she called, her voice laden with emotion. "There's an entry here about Kodiak's behavior during a storm at the zoo." The guide approached, his flashlight illuminating the diary's pages. During tonight's strong storm, Kodiak demonstrated extraordinary behavior. While other animals were agitated, he created a natural shelter in his enclosure, using branches and leaves. The most impressive thing was observing him guiding cubs of other animals to this improvised shelter. This information made Ethan rethink his entire search strategy. "He's not just wandering through the forest," he concluded, his eyes scanning the rugged terrain. "Kodiak is looking for a specific place, a refuge." At the hospital, Sarah received the first news about the search. Her anguish was visible, but there was something in her mother's heart that prevented her from losing hope. "I know he's alive," she repeated to Michael, who held her hand tightly. "I can feel it." Back in the forest, Ethan's team discovered something intriguing. Among the rocks, they found footprints forming a circular pattern, as if Kodiak was patrolling a specific area. Even more surprising were the signs of other animals: raccoon tracks, claw marks from squirrels, feathers from nocturnal birds, all converging in the same direction. "It's as if the entire forest is moving in sync," observed Olivia, recording the discoveries in her notebook. The team's flashlights revealed a subtle path through the vegetation, almost imperceptible to less trained eyes. In the city, media coverage reached national proportions. Journalists vied for space to broadcast live, each offering their own theory about William's disappearance. Some speculated about the danger posed by Kodiak, while others began to notice something different in this story. Our veteran reporter, Lisa Johnson, stood out for her more sensitive approach. "Something extraordinary is happening in the Blue Ridge Mountains," she reported. "The older residents speak of a special connection between Kodiak and the forest, an ancient wisdom that transcends our modern understanding." Ethan and his team continued advancing, now guided not only by physical signs, but by a deeper understanding of Kodiak's behavior. The keeper's diary had revealed that the bear possessed a unique ability to create bonds, to understand needs beyond his own. The night advanced, and with it a soft melody began to echo through the forest, a sound different from anything they had ever heard before. It was a mixture of a baby's laughter with the song of nocturnal birds and the gentle roar of a bear. The rescue team stopped, hypnotized by the unlikely harmony of those sounds. "We're close," whispered Ethan, his heart racing with the possibility of finding William. But something in his gut told him that what they were about to discover was much more than a simple rescue. It was the awakening of a deeper understanding about the connection between man and nature. Morning began to dawn in Asheville, bringing with it a new wave of speculations and discoveries. At the traditional cafe in the central square, long-time residents shared stories about the Thompsons' private zoo, revealing details that until then had remained hidden in the mists of time. Mrs. Eleanor, who had worked as a cook at the zoo for decades, held her coffee cup with trembling hands as she spoke to reporter Lisa Johnson. Miguel, the keeper, always said that Kodiak was different. Since he was a cub, he demonstrated an intelligence that went beyond normal. "I remember a day when a child fell near his enclosure. Instead of getting agitated like any animal would, Kodiak remained in absolute silence until the girl was helped." At the old zoo, now abandoned, Olivia conducted a thorough investigation. Among dusty documents and forgotten records, she found photographs documenting extraordinary moments in Kodiak's life. One image in particular caught her attention: the bear sitting calmly while children from a special needs school interacted with him through the protective fence. "Ethan, you need to see this," she called over the radio. "I found Kodiak's medical records. According to the veterinarian's notes, he exhibited extremely low cortisol levels for a bear in captivity, indicating an exceptional state of calm." At the police station, Sheriff Hayes received an unexpected visit. Andrew Thompson, former owner of the zoo, arrived accompanied by his daughter Emma. The businessman, normally reserved, seemed burdened with guilt and regret. "I need to tell you something about Kodiak," he began, his voice laden with emotion. "When the zoo started facing financial problems, I received several offers from international buyers interested in him. But Miguel, the keeper, warned me that Kodiak had a greater purpose here. He said the bear had a special connection with the Blue Ridge Mountains." Emma, rummaging through her bag, pulled out a flash drive. "I found this among Miguel's things after his passing. They're videos he secretly recorded, documenting Kodiak's behavior. The images shown on the police station's computer screen left everyone in silence. Recordings of Kodiak interacting extraordinarily with various animals, creating a kind of harmony in the zoo that defied understanding. In the city, a group of environmentalists led by Professor Amanda Collins from the local university organized a public presentation. Kodiak's case is not unique in nature, she explained to an attentive audience. There are records of wild animals that develop interspecies altruistic behaviors. What makes Kodiak special is his conscious ability to create bridges between the wild world and the human world. Meanwhile, Sarah, still in the hospital, received a visit from a Native American elder from the region. Mary Redhawk, known for her knowledge of the mountain's ancient traditions, held the anxious mother's hands while sharing her wisdom. "Our land holds ancestral stories of guardian animals," Mary explained with a serene voice, "beings that transcend their wild nature to protect those in need. Kodiak is not just a bear, he is a messenger, a guardian chosen by the mountains themselves." At the operations center, the revelations about Kodiak's past began to change the authorities' perspective. What was initially seen as a threat was transforming into a story of hope. The documents found by Olivia, combined with the testimonies of former zoo employees, painted the portrait of an extraordinary being. Reporter Lisa Johnson, in her live broadcast, captured the transformation in the city's sentiment. "Asheville is witnessing something unique in its history," she narrated. "A story that makes us question not only our relationship with nature, but our understanding of compassion and protection." The Blue Ridge Mountains dawned enveloped in a dense fog that seemed to dance between the ancient trees. Ethan Miller and his team had spent the night following the mysterious signs the forest offered. The bird song was different that morning, more melodious and directed, as if trying to communicate something. "Look!" exclaimed Olivia, pointing to a set of fresh tracks in the damp soil. They were not just Kodiak's marks. There was an intricate pattern of footprints from various animals, all following the same direction. Raccoons, squirrels, and even deer seemed to be participating in a silent procession through the forest. On the radio, communications between rescue teams revealed similar discoveries at different points in the mountains. It was as if all the local fauna was moving in a mysterious choreography, converging on a specific point deep in the woods. "The elders called this place Whisper Valley," explained Mary Redhawk, who had joined the search team after her visit to Sarah at the hospital. The elder walked with surprising agility among the trees, her eyes attentive to signs that others barely noticed. "It's a place where, according to legends, the boundary between the world of men and the natural world becomes thinner." Ethan constantly consulted the keeper's diary, connecting the old observations about Kodiak with the signs they were finding. One entry in particular caught his attention. "Today I observed Kodiak create a kind of nest at the highest point of his enclosure. Not for himself, but to shelter bird chicks that had fallen during a storm. His ability to care for other species is simply extraordinary." The fog began to dissipate in certain spots, revealing rock formations that seemed to form a natural path. The surrounding vegetation was untouched, but there were subtle signs of passage. Branches carefully moved aside without being broken, as if something large had created a passage while considering the preservation of the environment. "The sound is stronger this way," observed one of the team members, referring to the mysterious melody they had begun to hear the night before. It was a unique combination: William's crystalline laughter, bird song, and a deep rhythmic sound that could only be from Kodiak. Lisa Johnson, who had obtained authorization to accompany the search team, documented each discovery with a wonderstruck look. "It's as if we're being guided," she whispered, noticing how the sunbeams breaking through the fog seemed to form a luminous path between the trees. As they advanced, the surrounding environment began to change subtly. The temperature became milder, the air lighter. Multicolored butterflies appeared out of nowhere, dancing around the team like small winged guides. The moss under their feet felt softer, almost like a natural carpet. Ethan suddenly stopped, raising his hand in a sign for silence. In the distance, through a curtain of giant ferns, they glimpsed a different clearing in the forest. The light there seemed to have a special quality, as if it were filtered by something more than just the leaves of the trees. Mary Redhawk smiled, her eyes shining with recognition. "Whisper Valley is welcoming us," she said softly, "but we must approach with respect and calm." Kodiak didn't choose this place by chance. He is an ancient guardian, wiser than we can understand. The team prepared for what they might find beyond that natural curtain. The sound of William's laughter was clearer now, mixed with a symphony of forest sounds that seemed to celebrate something extraordinary happening in that sacred corner of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The rescue team crossed the curtain of giant ferns with the delicacy of those entering a sacred temple. What they saw on the other side made everyone stop, awestruck. A natural clearing opened before them, bathed in a golden light that seemed to dance between the leaves. In the center of this natural amphitheater, an extraordinary scene unfolded. William was sitting on a soft carpet of moss, laughing happily, while a group of raccoons performed acrobatics around him. Kodiak, the immense grizzly bear, remained close, his body relaxed yet attentive. The most surprising thing was the atmosphere of complete harmony that hung in the air. "Incredible," whispered Ethan, noticing how various forest animals shared the space without any sign of fear or aggression. Multicolored birds perched near the baby, singing a melody that seemed to be part of a greater symphony. A pair of squirrels swung on the low branches, occasionally dropping small ripe fruits that William observed with fascination. Mary Redhawk, with tears in her eyes, held Ethan's arm. "See how Kodiak created a protective nest." She pointed to how the moss and leaves had been organized around William, creating a comfortable and safe space. Lisa Johnson discreetly filmed the scene, knowing she was documenting something unique in history. Kodiak's behavior defied everything known about bears. With gentle movements, he occasionally approached William, checking on his well-being with almost maternal care. The reporter noticed something even more extraordinary. Small dewdrops seemed to float in the air, creating a spectacle of light that made the clearing appear enchanted. The sunbeams, as they passed through these drops, formed tiny rainbows that made William clap his hands with joy. "We need to approach very carefully," Ethan guided the team. "We can't break this harmony." He knew they were witnessing something precious, a rare demonstration of how nature can transcend its own laws when guided by a greater purpose. Olivia quickly consulted the keeper's diary, finding a passage that seemed to predict this moment. "Sometimes when I observe Kodiak, I have the feeling that he understands something we humans have long forgotten, the ability to truly connect with other forms of life." The first to move was a small raccoon, which approached the rescue team curiously. Its relaxed behavior seemed a sign that their presence was accepted. Kodiak raised his head, his eyes meeting Ethan's. There was no hostility in his gaze, only an ancient and deep wisdom. William, noticing the newcomers, opened an even bigger smile and extended his little arms towards them. It was as if the baby understood that this magical moment was coming to an end, but without any sadness, just the pure joy of someone who had experienced something extraordinary. Mary Redhawk began to sing softly an ancient mountain song, her melodious voice blending perfectly with the sounds of the forest. Kodiak responded with a deep and gentle sound, almost as if accompanying the melody. The other animals seemed to understand that it was time for a transition. The light in the clearing changed subtly, as if the forest itself was participating in this moment of encounter between two worlds. The butterflies danced in the air, creating hypnotic patterns that made William burst into laughter of pure joy. Ethan took a step forward, guided by Mary Redhawk's wisdom. The elder had explained that this moment needed to be conducted with the deepest respect, not as a rescue, but as a transfer of guardianship. Kodiak watched attentively, his relaxed body demonstrating that he understood the nature of the moment. "It's like a dance," whispered Mary, her voice blending with the birdsong. Each movement must flow naturally. She began to chant an ancient mountain song, a melody that spoke of guardians and protection, of cycles that complete and new ones that begin. Lisa Johnson, still discreetly documenting, noticed how the light in the clearing seemed to respond to the music, creating golden patterns that danced between the trees. The animals around William began to move in their own rhythm, as if participating in an ancestral ritual. Kodiak rose to his full height, not in a threatening manner, but with impressive dignity. With deliberately slow movements, he began to move away from William, creating space for Ethan to approach. The baby, still smiling, alternated his gaze between the bear and the newcomers, as if understanding that he was participating in something extraordinary. "Look," whispered Olivia, pointing to the clearing sky. A group of blue butterflies had formed a perfect circle above them, their wings shining like living sapphires under the light filtered by the trees. The raccoons, which had been playing with William earlier, organized themselves into a respectful line, like small guardians paying a final tribute. Ethan approached the baby with soft steps, his feet barely touching the soft moss. William extended his little arms to him, but his eyes remained fixed on Kodiak, as if wanting to ensure that his protector approved of this transition. The bear emitted a soft, almost musical sound that made all the animals in the clearing respond in a surprising harmony. Mary Redhawk continued her chant, now incorporating words of gratitude into her melody. "The mountains will never forget," she translated between verses. "The guardian chose to protect, and his choice will be honored for all generations." When Ethan finally reached William, the baby allowed himself to be picked up without any resistance. At that moment, a ray of sunlight broke through the treetops, creating a halo of light around them. The birds, which had momentarily silenced, resumed their song in an explosion of melodies. Kodiak moved with impressive grace for his size, approaching William one last time. With gentleness, he softly touched the baby's head with his muzzle, a farewell gesture that brought tears to the eyes of all present. William laughed, his small hands touching the bear's soft fur one last time. Lisa Johnson realized she was documenting not just a rescue, but a moment of profound transformation. "It's as if we're witnessing the reconciliation between two worlds," she whispered, noticing how each animal in the clearing seemed to participate in that farewell in its own way. The sunbeams that passed through the leaves created a spectacle of light and shadow, as if the forest itself wanted to mark that moment in its eternal memory. A gentle breeze blew through the clearing, carrying wildflower petals that danced in the air like natural confetti. The news of William's rescue spread through Asheville like a breath of hope. At the hospital, Sarah and Michael waited anxiously, their hands intertwined in a mixture of expectation and emotion. The medical team had prepared a special room to receive the baby, although initial reports indicated he was perfectly healthy. The convoy transporting William descended the mountains in a slow and careful procession. Ethan held the baby in his arms, marveling at his cheerful disposition. Throughout the journey, blue butterflies accompanied the vehicle, like a magical escort that refused to leave its small protege. "It's a miracle," commented Dr. Richard, the chief pediatrician at the hospital, after examining William. "He's not only well, he's thriving. His body temperature is perfect. There are no signs of dehydration or any other problem. It's as if he had been in a perfectly regulated natural incubator." The reunion with the parents was a moment of pure emotion. Sarah, upon seeing her son, noticed something different in his eyes, a special sparkle, as if William had experienced something magical that would never be forgotten. The baby smiled and babbled, making sounds that resembled the birdsong of the forest. "He's trying to tell us his story," observed Mary Redhawk, who had accompanied the rescue to the hospital. The elder smiled serenely, recognizing in William's gestures the signs of someone who had been touched by the ancient magic of the mountains. In the city, the atmosphere was one of celebration, but also of profound transformation. People gathered in squares and cafes, sharing their own experiences and reflections on the extraordinary story of Kodiak and William. What had begun as a fear of the fugitive bear had transformed into a lesson in humility and respect for nature. Lisa Johnson, in her special report, captured the general sentiment. "Asheville has witnessed more than a rescue. We've experienced a moment of reconnection with something we had lost in our daily rush, the understanding that we are part of something greater, that nature possesses a wisdom that transcends our rational comprehension." At the hospital, Michael surprised everyone with an emotional announcement. "This experience has changed our perspective forever," he declared, with Sarah by his side. "We've decided to create a foundation dedicated to the preservation of the Blue Ridge Mountains and the protection of its fauna. The first project will be the creation of a natural sanctuary where Kodiak and other animals can live in freedom and safety." The news was received with emotional applause. Ethan, who had witnessed firsthand the magic of Whisper Valley, was invited to lead the Foundation's conservation initiatives. His knowledge of the mountains, combined with Mary Redhawk's traditional wisdom, would be fundamental in ensuring that the legacy of this extraordinary experience would be perpetuated. Meanwhile, in the depths of the forest, mysterious sounds echoed among the trees, the song of birds, the rustling of leaves, and occasionally the gentle roar of a bear. The Blue Ridge Mountains would forever guard in their memory the story of the guardian who defied the barriers between the wild world and the human world, proving that love and protection transcend all differences. Asheville would never be the same after the story of Kodiak and William. The weeks following the rescue brought profound changes to the heart of the mountain city. The old Thompson Zoo, once a symbol of controversy, was now transforming into the center of an ambitious conservation project. Andrew Thompson, inspired by Kodiak's extraordinary demonstration of protection, donated the entire property to the newly created Guardians of the Mountains Foundation. "My father always said that every mistake can be turned into a lesson," Emma Thompson commented during the donation ceremony. "Today we're transforming an old mistake into new hope for the Blue Ridge Mountains." The project, led by Ethan Miller and supervised by Mary Redhawk, was already taking shape. The old cages gave way to recovery centers for wild animals. The high walls were replaced by living fences that allowed nature to flow freely. The place that once imprisoned now became a portal of connection between the urban world and the natural world. "The most impressive thing is how the entire city has embraced the change," observed Lisa Johnson in her new series of reports. Local schools included lessons on environmental preservation and the importance of balance between development and nature in their curricula. Children drew Kodiak in their art activities, portraying him not as a fearsome beast, but as a wise and gentle guardian. Sarah and Michael transformed their experience into concrete action. The Guardians of the Mountains Foundation quickly became a model of environmental conservation, attracting experts and environmentalists from across the country. "Every penny invested here is a tribute to the extraordinary being who protected our son," Michael declared during a meeting with international investors. Little William, now a local celebrity, demonstrated a unique connection with nature. His parents noticed how he responded specially to birdsong and how his first words included sounds that resembled those of the forest. "It's as if he brought a bit of the magic of Whisper Valley with him," Sarah commented, watching her son play in the garden. Mary Redhawk established an environmental education program that united scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom. Her outdoor classes, held on carefully selected mountain trails, attracted people of all ages. "The forest has always been our teacher," she taught. "Now finally, we are ready to listen to its lessons." The transformation reached even the hotel sector, the city's main economic activity. Establishments began to adopt sustainable practices and offer responsible eco-tourism programs. The story of Kodiak and William had become part of the tourist itinerary, but always told with reverence and respect. Whisper Valley, although its exact location was kept secret to preserve its magic, transformed into a symbol of hope. The older residents said that on especially quiet nights, it was still possible to hear the harmonious song of the forest echoing through the mountains like a reminder of the extraordinary moment that changed the city forever. Researchers arriving in Asheville found a unique phenomenon. The local population had developed a deep and genuine environmental awareness that went beyond conventional conservation practices. It was as if the entire city had awakened to a new way of existing in harmony with nature. The transformation initiated in Asheville began to spread like ripples in a serene lake. Neighboring towns, inspired by the success of the Guardians of the Mountains project, sought ways to replicate the initiative in their own regions. The story of Kodiak and William crossed borders, becoming a symbol of how the relationship between humans and nature could be reimagined. Ethan Miller, now conservation director of the foundation, received delegations from various countries. "What we have here is more than a preservation project," he explained during an international seminar. "It's a new model of coexistence, where urban development respects and adapts to natural cycles." Mary Redhawk, with her ancestral wisdom, became a central figure in this transformation movement. Her environmental education program was adapted for other communities, always respecting local particularities. "Each region has its own voice," she taught. "The secret is learning to listen to what the nature of each place has to tell us." Little William, now almost 2 years old, showed extraordinary development. His connection with nature manifested in surprising ways. During walks through the new conservation center, animals responded to his presence in a unique way. Birds landed nearby, squirrels approached without fear, as if recognizing something special in him. Sarah documented her son's growth in a diary, which soon transformed into an inspiring book. Lessons from the Valley, as it was titled, became an international bestseller, blending the extraordinary story of the rescue with profound reflections on our relationship with the natural world. The foundation expanded its activities to include a research center on animal behavior. Internationally renowned scientists arrived to study the unique phenomenon that had developed in the region. What we observe here challenges our conventional knowledge about interactions between species, stated Dr. Sofia Martinez, a world-renowned primatologist. The old zoo, completely transformed, became a model of environmental recovery. The spaces once occupied by cages now housed research laboratories, wildlife rehabilitation centers, and interactive environmental education areas. The old structures were converted using sustainable techniques, harmoniously integrating with the natural landscape. Emma Thompson, now leading an audio-visual documentation project, captured extraordinary moments of local fauna recovery. "It's as if Kodiak's presence had awakened something dormant in the mountains," she commented, showing images of species that hadn't been seen in the region for decades. Whisper Valley maintained its mystery, now protected by an agreement between the Foundation and local authorities. Periodically, authorized researchers conducted studies in the region, always accompanied by Mary Redhawk or Ethan. The results of these studies revealed unique patterns of animal behavior and forest regeneration. Lisa Johnson, who continued documenting the project's evolution, produced a series of documentaries that inspired changes in other parts of the world. What began as a rescue story has transformed into a global movement of reconnection with nature, she narrated in her most recent work. The research center of the Guardians of the Mountains Foundation buzzed with a unique energy. Scientists and scholars of ancient traditions worked side by side, seeking to understand the extraordinary phenomenon that had occurred in the region. In one of the main laboratories, Dr. Sofia Martinez analyzed behavioral patterns never before documented in local fauna. "It's fascinating," she explained, showing graphs on a digital screen. "Since the event with Kodiak, we've observed significant changes in the behavior of mountain animals. There's a coordination between different species that defies all known theories about animal behavior." Mary Redhawk, seated in a corner of the laboratory, smiled serenely while weaving a mat with natural fibers. "The ancients always knew," she commented, her hands moving with ancestral precision. "There's an invisible web that connects all living beings. Kodiak just helped us see it again." Little William frequently visited the center with his parents. His presence caused extraordinary reactions in the animals undergoing rehabilitation. During one of these visits, an injured toucan chick, which had refused to feed for days, began to eat as soon as the boy approached its enclosure. Ethan meticulously documented each of these events. "It's not just coincidence," he explained during a meeting with international researchers. "We're observing a consistent pattern of behavior that suggests a form of communication that transcends conventional barriers between species." Emma Thompson, through her high-tech cameras, captured extraordinary moments in the forest. Her images showed different animal species cooperating in ways never before recorded. "It's as if Kodiak had activated an ancient memory in the forest," she reflected, reviewing the footage. In the Foundation's sound laboratory, a specialized team analyzed recordings made in Whisper Valley. The sound patterns revealed surprising complexity. "There's music in the forest," explained Dr. Richard Mendez, a bioacoustics expert. "A natural harmony that seems to have been amplified since the event with Kodiak." Sarah, who continued documenting William's development, noticed how her son seemed to intuitively understand this natural language. During walks through the forest, he often stopped and tilted his head, as if listening to music that only he could hear. Mary Redhawk established a study circle where scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom met with equal importance. "Science helps us understand the how," she taught, "but ancient traditions show us the why. We need both to truly understand what happened here." The discoveries made at the research center began to influence the way conservation projects were conducted around the world. The approach that integrated modern science and traditional knowledge proved extraordinarily effective in preserving and recovering ecosystems. In the depths of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Kodiak had become an almost mythical presence. Although rarely seen, his influence was felt throughout the region. Local residents began to notice curious patterns. When storms approached, Forest animals moved in an organized manner to safe areas, as if guided by an invisible force. Ethan Miller kept a detailed map of these occurrences in his office at the Foundation. "It's as if Kodiak has become a guardian of the entire mountain range," he explained during a meeting with environmentalists. "His presence has created a natural protection network that benefits all the local fauna." Mary Redhawk, who spent long hours meditating on the mountain trails, often reported subtle encounters with the bear. "He never shows himself completely," she would say with a serene smile, "but he leaves signs of his passage, a footprint here, a carefully bent branch there. These are messages for those who know how to read the signs of the forest." Little William, now more aware of his unique experience, demonstrated a special sensitivity to these signs. During walks with his parents through the reserve, he would often stop at specific locations, pointing to the forest with a knowing smile. Sarah documented these moments, noting how they coincided with reports of unusual activity in the local wildlife. The Guardians of the Mountains Foundation had established a special protocol to document what they called the Kodiak effect. Special cameras, installed at strategic points in the forest, captured surprising images of different species interacting harmoniously in areas where the bear's presence was most frequently noted. Emma Thompson, through her documentation work, managed to capture an extraordinary moment. During a full moon night, various animals gathered in a clearing similar to Whisper Valley. The images showed behavior that suggested a kind of natural ritual, with each species occupying its place in a perfect circle. "The most fascinating thing," observed Dr. Amanda Collins, "is how this influence extends beyond animal behavior. We're observing significant changes in vegetation growth patterns, in the water quality of streams, and even in the way bees pollinate flowers in the region." Lisa Johnson, who continued following the story, produced a special series about the phenomenon. "What we're witnessing here is not just a case of environmental conservation," she narrated. "It's the awakening of a collective consciousness that transcends the separation between the human world and the natural world." The residents of the region developed an almost reverential respect for the forest. Stories about encounters with Kodiak were shared with a mixture of admiration and gratitude. Each account reinforced the image of the bear, not as a wild creature to be feared, but as a wise guardian who chose to protect both the forest and its human inhabitants. A year had passed since the extraordinary encounter between Kodiak and William. Asheville had transformed into an international model of environmental conservation and sustainable development. The project, initiated by the Guardians of the Mountains Foundation, inspired similar initiatives in different parts of the world. In the old zoo headquarters, now completely renovated, Michael and Sarah presided over a special ceremony. The foundation was inaugurating the International Center for Studies on Natural Coexistence, a space dedicated to researching and promoting harmonious forms of interaction between humans and nature. "What happened to our son taught us that we need to completely rethink our relationship with the natural world," Michael spoke to an attentive audience. "It's not just about preserving, but about relearning how to coexist." William, now a lively child of almost 3 years old, played in the Foundation's new sensory park, a space where children could experience different textures, sounds, and aromas of the forest. His laughter continued to attract small animals, which approached without fear, as if recognizing in him a bridge between the two worlds. Mary Redhawk, with the help of educators and environmentalists, had developed a unique curriculum that was beginning to be adopted by schools across the country. "Children are naturally connected to the essence of life," she explained. "Our role is to not let them lose that connection." Ethan Miller now coordinated an international network of protected areas, all inspired by the model developed in the Blue Ridge Mountains. "Each region has its own guardians," he explained during a symposium. "We just need to learn to recognize and respect them." Whisper Valley, maintained as a restricted access area, continued to surprise the researchers authorized to study it. Dr. Amanda Collins had identified unique patterns of forest regeneration in the region. "It's as if the soil holds the memory of what happened here," she reported in her studies. Lisa Johnson, who had become one of the leading voices in environmental journalism, was preparing to launch a special documentary about the transformations that had occurred since the event with Kodiak. "This story has shown us that miracles happen," she narrated, "not as supernatural events, but as moments of reconnection with our true nature. The city had become a hub for conscious tourism, attracting visitors interested in experiencing a new form of relationship with the natural environment. Hotels and inns had adapted to a hospitality model that prioritized low environmental impact and ecological education. Stories about Kodiak continued to circulate, always with new elements. Forest rangers occasionally reported finding enormous footprints near injured animals or lost cubs. It was as if the bear continued his mission as a protector, now in a more subtle and comprehensive manner. Little William, although still very young, demonstrated a unique wisdom when it came to nature. During a walk with his parents on the Foundation's trail, he suddenly stopped and pointed to the forest. "Kodiak cares," he said simply, with a smile that seemed to hold all the secrets of the mountains. On an especially clear morning in the Blue Ridge Mountains, the city of Asheville celebrated the second anniversary of William's rescue. The event, which had now become an annual celebration of environmental awareness, brought together people from all parts of the world at the headquarters of the Guardians of the Mountains Foundation. The place where it all began had transformed into a living sanctuary. The old zoo structures gave way to hanging gardens and research centers that harmoniously integrated with the natural landscape. At the center of the complex, a life-size sculpture of Kodiak, created by local artists, served as a permanent reminder of the Guardian who changed the city's history. William, now 3 years old, walked hand in hand with Mary Redhawk along the paths of the reserve. His extraordinary development continued to surprise everyone. The special connection he maintained with nature manifested in increasingly significant ways. Plants seemed to bloom more intensely in his presence, and wild animals still demonstrated a unique affinity with the boy. The story of Kodiak and William is not just about a miraculous rescue, Sarah spoke to the gathered visitors. It's about awakening a dormant consciousness in all of us. It's about rediscovering our true nature as guardians, not conquerors, of this planet. The Foundation's work had expanded far beyond the borders of Asheville. Projects inspired by its conservation model flourished on different continents. Ethan Miller, who now coordinated a global network of similar initiatives, observed with satisfaction how the seed planted in the Blue Ridge Mountains germinated in distant lands. Lisa Johnson, concluding her documentary about the city's transformation, captured an especially significant moment during the celebration. As William played near the forest, a blue butterfly of the same species that accompanied his rescue landed on his nose, provoking his crystalline laughter that echoed through the mountains. In Whisper Valley, now a site of scientific and spiritual pilgrimage, researchers continue to discover new patterns of animal behavior and forest regeneration. Dr. Amanda Collins had identified what she called the William effect, an inexplicable acceleration in natural healing and regeneration processes in areas frequented by the boy. Stories about Kodiak never ceased. Residents occasionally reported sighting an imposing figure in the more remote areas of the mountains, always in times of need. It was as if the bear had become a permanent guardian presence, protecting the region in his silent and wise manner. Michael, observing the complete transformation that his family and his city had experienced, reflected on how a moment of apparent tragedy had transformed into a gift to the world. The Guardians of the Mountains Foundation had become a beacon of hope, showing that it was possible to create a new form of coexistence between humans and nature. Mary Redhawk, in her ancestral wisdom, used to say that the story of Kodiak and William didn't really have an end. "It's a cycle that keeps renewing itself," she explained, "just like the seasons, just like life itself in the forest. Each new day brings the possibility of another miracle, of another reconnection." And so as the sun set over the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, the city of Asheville continued its journey of transformation. The legacy of Kodiak and William lived not only in the stories told, but in the new consciousness that had awakened in each person touched by their extraordinary adventure. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Kodiak and William has touched your hearts and awakened a new consciousness about our relationship with nature. To continue this journey of transformation and discoveries, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Share your own stories of connection with nature in the comments below. Together, we can create a world where humans and nature live in harmony. Until the next story.